And so now I'll pass it over to Sanju.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Usha. And thank you, Anita. I am Sanju. I'm the founder of RISE, and we operate in the most rural communities of West Bengal. We run a supplementary school for first-generation learners, and we run a literacy program for them to be able to catch up with their education. And we've been working in this space for 10 years, ever since I set up the charity just before I was a teacher through the Teach First program in London. And I guess where I'm coming from with wanting to absolutely change the pathway and destination and life of marginalised girls is because of the experience I had as a young person myself, going to rural India because of the connection with my family and seeing not just girls in complete deprivation, but that impact on them and the quality of their life. So while I was thinking about going to university or thinking about my career, I had girls my age who I'd been growing up playing with in the village, thinking about marriage at the age of 14 or 15, you know, thinking about working the fields and earning money for their family. And so these issues for me are a personal thing that I want to definitely combat, and something that when I thought about founding RISE was exactly at the center. And we work with girls and boys, but 57% of our girls are girls, and we have 86% who are first generation learners. That means that they don't have role models of parents thinking about staying in education, thinking about increasing their quality of life. And I guess the context of 90% being below the poverty line, living in rooms, maybe the size of your living room that's made out of, bamboo or tiles and that sort of thing. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about girls who really, really need access and support. But the framework is so crucial because of the three pillars that I want to kind of talk to briefly around, being the fact that that first pillar around the organization of training. Now at RISE, we think that continuous agile teacher training is the most important thing, where teachers are collaborating with each other, where they're learning from each other when they're developing their innovative session activities to help these children with their literacy, and they're creating teaching and learning materials together. So a little flavor of organization and delivery of training programs. And then we come to the content of training programs. And our content is completely tailored to the needs of teachers. And we do that in response to feedback sessions that we run with a session coach. And the session coach is a really important part of the teacher training journey. And it's where they get regular feedback. They can feedback to the coach, and then the coach can incorporate that into the content of our training. And then the third is around the support mechanism. So that session coach being so crucial to observe classes, discuss feedback candidly on areas that then can come back into the teaching delivery. And that's had a really great impact. And, I talked a little bit about how much deprivation, how large scale the issues are for the girls that we support. And how do we begin to tackle that level of, issue? And so what RISE does, and what you really, again, lies at the center of our work, is putting innovation at the core. And innovation is definitely contextual. It completely depends on the area that you're working in. Of course, we're talking about rural West Bengal. And so innovation can look very different to different mediums and output. And so I just want to kind of bring three examples that I think are examples of innovation within our context at RISE, and leaning towards gender responsive pedagogy, thinking about how can we give young women, young girls, a voice so that they can begin to change the pathway of their life. And so you might consider a small example. So we have this thing called the Little Magazine. So we publish annually work that girls write, they draw. It can be a poem, it can be a story, and it's published in a little magazine, and they get to kind of keep that copy and know that they've actually created something. And, I think that, when I was growing up at school, we would do those sorts of things all the time. But in rural India, in the context of government schools, that's not something that happens. And we want to be able to bring experiences to these young people they wouldn't have in their government school, because we're supplementary education. So a little magazine that they can then show to their family, show to their friends, and feel really proud of their work and representing their voice in the publication. And then another, I guess, quite different example of innovation is trips to the capital, Kolkata. So I talk about us being in a very rural community. We are about 3 hours away from the capital, Kolkata, West Bengal. And most of our girls, but before we had met them, had never left their village. And so just that notion of being able to take a trip to Kolkata, that was a big thing for them. Their parents allowing them to leave their side, to get on a coach to come to Kolkata, the city. But taking that a step further, we had an event where we had a chance to participate in the Kolkata Marathon. And that started early in the morning. And so it would require girls to stay overnight. And that is just something that in the rural communities we work with is not a done thing. The notion of a girl spending a night away from the home, being out after dark, these are some of the challenges that they are dealing with in terms of, I guess, freedom or just ability to have a little bit of self-expression. So we had, I guess, quite a big challenge ahead of us that we got through, from coaching teachers to have conversations with parents around the benefits of events and excursions to Kolkata. And in the end, these young girls were able to come on the trip. They stayed overnight. It was a huge experience for them, a liberating one for these 14, 15, 16-year-olds who had never been out of their home before, to participate in the Kolkata Marathon. And that trust that we had built with the parents, so crucial again, but that's part of our teacher training as well. How do we have those dialogues with parents and students so that we can really build the trust that's going to enable them to kind of take part in events like that? And then the third area for me, probably one of my most precious, is thinking about the fact that ambassadors, girls who have been through the RISE program, we stay in touch with them. Our door is always open to them, regardless of the outcome. Now, some of the issues that our children face are child marriage. I mentioned that, something that I've seen as a child myself from some of my peers. And actually, we have to date have had 84 of our young children been married off, even despite our intervention. That's the scale of the issue. As young as 14, 15, 16, 17 being married. And one specific example is a young girl called Shompa, who, we've been working with her since she was 13. She was so excited about the prospect of being a policewoman. She sat her Madhyamik exams, the equivalent of GCSE at age 16. And she was so happy. She was the first one in her family to have done that. But there were other things going on behind the scenes. She was suffering from domestic abuse from her father, who was an alcoholic and beating her up. And she fled. She left and she went and eloped and she got married. It turned out that she failed her exams. She was really upset about that. And then she thought she got married. She was pregnant. She had a child, and that education and changing the path of her life was over for her. And we said the door is always open. So she came back to us. She reset her exams. She passed her exams, and we're still in touch with her. And recently she has now restarted her education again, and she's thinking about regaining that confidence to become a policewoman. And that's now 3 years after she got married and left us. So that notion of the door is always open. It doesn't matter if you get married, if you have a child, you can still stay with us and stay in education, and we can support you. So I think, I think of those as three quite different notions of innovative expression. A couple more things around what we do to support teachers to help marginalised girls is that open discussion about the issues affecting them. And that's really, really important in the communities we work with. I have an example where one of our members of staff, in fact, when Shomba was married off and we were trying to talk to the family and see if there were things that we could do to counter that, said, well, this is what happens in the Sharda community, because they are from a tribal community. And we had to have a really dynamic, open discussion around changing that, changing perspective, changing attitudes being so important to the center of our training. And then another key thing around data on students. So when a teacher starts to teach a particular group of students, they don't just know about their attainment level and literacy level. They know about their hobbies. What is their ambition? Where do they live? They do home visits. They have that level of communication with students that's going to really, really help them understand the student that they're supporting. And so I guess I just want to end with, yes, there's lots of great things that we can do, but there are challenges as well, even that come out through the teaching framework. Things like, for example, the fact that we want to bring more vocational study into our teaching and learning, so that our girls are full of skills already. They've been cooking from a young age, they've been sewing, doing handicrafts, they're skilled in agriculture. So we want to think about how can we embed that more, building on existing skills, so that the teaching and learning process is even more aligned with the children that we're working with. We have a huge barrier with language, so content most of the time is in English. There are 228 million people who speak Bengali as their first native language, and we don't have enough materials in that language, and that's something that I think we need to address. And I would really like to see the framework, you know, rolled out on a larger scale across West Bengal's population of 91 million. And I think part of that is working with parents in the community and helping to change their mindset, so we can see for them, it's not just about short-term gains, it's the longer-term impact of education on the quality of life. And I would love to talk to all of you more about this. Perhaps you can join us in the breakout room.
Thank you so much, Sanju. That was fantastic. And I know that there is much more for her to share in the breakouts.
Okay, lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for joining the RISE breakout session. So I'm just going to share my screen and let me know if you can see it. Okie dokie. Are we in business? Can you guys see my screen?
Perfect.
Wonderful. Great, David. Thank you for joining. So wanted to carry on a little bit from the conversation that we were having in the main room. But this is very much meant to be interactive. So questions are welcome, thoughts, any perspectives, very welcome. And we're just going to spend about 15 minutes together talking about just a little bit more about the challenges that girls do face, so that we can really contextualize that. And then talking about some of the things that RISE has specifically been doing that I really hope that, you know, you guys, if you are involved in teaching and learning practices, can think about some takeaways from there, some ideas specifically around gender responsive pedagogy and also social emotional resilience. And then just finally talking a little bit about some of the best training practices that we run at RISE. So that's kind of what we're going to be up to. And like I said, please shout, please speak at any point. And I just want to introduce as well, so we've got two of my fabulous team members from Krishnanagar, Shoma and Mohadi. And so if you have a direct question for them, please go ahead and ask as well. So welcome to them from Krishnanagar. So challenges that girls face, and some of this you'll be very familiar with. So when I started RISE, one of the things that was, you know, the driving force was that visual of hundreds and hundreds of girls just sitting outside in assembly, no assembly hall. And it was actually through that Teach First project that led me to set up RISE. But look at, you know, the infrastructural issues around their home, like I said, made of bamboo, only one room. During monsoon, the fact that, you know, their homes will be completely underwater, the fact that on average there are about 5 people in a family who are probably only earning cumulatively the equivalent of £2 a day, if that. So not enough food, you know, welfare situation is just abhorrent. And then of course we talk about the actual day-to-day challenges. What are girls doing? You know, they are working before and after school. Sometimes they don't attend school because they have to be working and putting that first as a priority, whether it be working in the field, carrying wood back to the home so they can cook, involved in the cooking process, or like Ananya here, you know, actually contributing to bringing in money for the family. And, you know, these are some visual challenges. That's not even thinking about the fact that I've talked about child marriage, or the fact that ultimately in these communities, education is still not a priority. And so much of what we're trying to do is change hearts and minds of young people and their parents who are just thinking that actually, how can we send our child to school when we can't afford to eat? So our mantra is that we are encouraging education for a better quality of life, so that young people can stand on their own 2 feet in the future. I'm going to stop there. I wonder if there are any observations or questions about some of the specific challenges that our children and our girls are facing in rural West Bengal.
So what age do girls, on average, start working then in? What age?
So it can differ, but I would actually say that, you know, from the age of 5 or 6, girls are working at home to support cooking, to support the running of the household, the cleaning. If your question specifically around, you know, going out for paid work, that might be more sort of 10, 11, 12. You know, Anonya was 14 when she was doing that. And, you know, that she won't go to school. There'll be days where kids don't go to school because they need to bring in money for the family. And that was so prevalent during the pandemic because, you know, work had stopped, income had stopped, and the only way to survive was to send, you know, girls out to do different things like sewing, garment factories. One example we have of one of our students, her name's Shongita. Her parents work full-time as a train hawker. So if you've been to India, you will know that on a very busy train, you'll have people come on board, try to sell you different things. So her parents do that. It earns very little, but that stopped because transportation stopped. So she started to go out, you know, to basically work in garment factories to keep that going. Shawana, we have a video of her where she brings in extra money by actually painting dots on dice that might bring in, you know, the equivalent of like 10p every day, but that's her supporting her family to bring in money. But thank you for that question. Were there any other questions about challenges of young people in rural communities in India? Otherwise, I shall move on to some of the things that we're doing to counter these challenges.
Sanju, I thought your story of never giving up was really inspiring. I mean, that was just brilliant. And I would guess that's quite unusual because, you know, normally, you know, kids who fall out of the school system don't get picked up. But maybe you could talk a bit more about that. Is that quite a typical position that people come back into the system?
I mean, a great question, David. It's not the typical situation at all, and it's something that I'd say we have had to fight for, because that attitudinal change is something that we have worked consistently on through the 10 years that we've been in rural India, right? So I'd say Shompa, who I mentioned, and that Shompa who's pictured here carrying the wood, she was the first young person who got married off and then, you know, came back into the education system. But she's been a role model for others. And we've had so many girls now do the same. And, you know, I said we stay in touch with them. So we have regular events. And recently we had Saraswati Puja, which is, and Ma Saraswati is the goddess of learning, and it's a very big event. And so many of our old girls came back and they said, listen, we want, you know, we've had the pandemic and we've had time to think. I mean, it's been a time of reflection for all of us. We want to come back into education. Can we? And the answer to that is yes, you can. But that's notwithstanding the pressures around the community. And I'll give you just another example of Siobhan, actually, who's also working in the field, saying to us that when she passed her Madhyamik exams and was thinking about joining college, which she has done, the people in the community would just say, oh, what are you doing? You're such a big girl. You should be married. And that kind of, it's so frowned upon. And this is what I was talking about, the long-term gain. This is not something that we're going to be able to fix in the short term, but slowly but surely, with some of these examples and role models, that's our aim and that's our hope. So we are beginning to see more young people say, do you know what? I've got my whole life ahead of me. Just because I've got married now does not mean that it needs to stop. I can still pursue my dreams. And that's, you know, that's really important. Thank you, David.
Brilliant.
So,
hello.
Hi, Mary.
Can I just ask you, how do you first of all get in contact with these youngsters? I know you're just talking about girls, and when I went over to India, I actually saw very young boys out trying to earn some money, selling water and such like to take home. And I said, why aren't you at school? And they said, because I have to get some money for my family.
Yes, absolutely.
And if the boys have done that, which are so much, you know, that they don't have half the problem as the girls, how do you actually contact the girls? How do you go, you know, to the villages or what?
That's a great question. And that's exactly how it started, Mary. So when I started Rise, I just basically, you know, we own a car. I got in my car and we just drove around to different schools, different villages. I said that I think, you know, we've got an idea here to help literacy in rural communities. And slowly but surely the word spread. And then from then, the past 10 years has been word of mouth. You know, if a girl joins and she has younger siblings, they'll come along and join as well. So I guess it is the notion of impact, as we know, impact that leads to scale and growth. And that's very much what's happened in these communities. So thank you, Mary. You know, when you're working at grassroots level, that's exactly what you have to do. You have to kind of go out into the communities. You have to immerse yourself in them. You know, we have our team who are joining from Krishnanagar, you know, our curriculum team, but we have an operations team. They are doing regular home visits to these communities to keep encouraging. And just talking about encouragement, there are so many ways we can encourage in the classroom, be it rewards and prizes, be it the type of activities we do, and be it in, you know, that notion of anyone can join a computer class. Like Siobhan, who I mentioned before, she said to me one of her most amazing opportunities with RISE was learning how to use a computer, something we take for granted in the UK because we have computer skills from a young age. That doesn't happen in government schools. But that also that piece around gender responsive pedagogy, because in some ways they think, okay, well, boys learn computers, but girls don't need to learn how to use computers. But of course, we know that's not true. The piece around using your voice. Now, we have this wonderful campaign called Dream on India that we got our girls and boys to get involved in. And they created these posters of how they want India to change. And so you can see some of the examples here around what they wear, you know, just self-expression, or the fact that just down in the bottom left-hand corner, holding a banner to say, look, protect us girls. In the top right-hand corner, the fact that, you know, we don't want to be married off at a young age, and we don't want to have to work, but we have, that's our reality. And also thinking about climate change issues as well. So this was a wonderful example of using your voice, as is, you know, events like International Women's Day. I mean, the girls, you know, that we work with didn't even know what International Women's Day before we started it, but it's become such a centerpiece of the work that we do at RISE. Mothers talking about their own experiences, the fact that they had their dreams, but they weren't able to utilize and fulfill them, and how can they make a difference for their children. And so again, I mean, David, back to your question around attitude change, around a thought process that is now, hang on a second, just because, you know, I had that journey, doesn't that mean that has to be the same for my young children, for my girls? You know, they actually made placards and they went round in the streets. And what's very interesting thing is the word for woman in Bengali is nari, and the word for no is na. And so they've got these sort of placards that are like, just because, you know, for women it doesn't mean no, it's yes. And so they've got this sort of galvanized spirit around celebrating womanhood, which is wonderful. I'll pause there because I've been talking for a while. Any other questions about some of the things that you're seeing? Because I do want, or any thoughts, because, you know, I do want to kind of keep this interactive. So if you've got any questions, please share. Otherwise,
can I ask a question? Do you actually include young people with special educational needs? Because I know I worked with another school in India, and what they found was when they were going out into the communities, they were finding children with additional needs just lying in their homes. And so they ended up doing a project to set up a new classroom for children with individual needs.
Yeah, such a great question. You know, whether it be disability, special needs, it's not something that is nurtured in the government school system at all. I think, you know, the fact that, you know, any kind of differences of that sort are looked upon very negatively, and it's not acceptable. We do have a lot of our children have learning difficulties. The fact is, when they come to us, they're already 5 or 6 years behind their reading level. So part of our intervention is specifically helping those with learning difficulties. And because we have class sizes of 1 to 10, and because we have activities like this, as you can see, which are very engaging, it's that engagement that is helping build the confidence of these young people who have special learning needs, to kind of build that gap. And we've definitely seen a major transition for some of these young people who the school system probably thought were just, you know, were so far behind that was it for them. And we've seen them improve in their attainment, get more confidence, and therefore become literate and then be able to engage in the rest of the curriculum. But it's such an important question, Carol, and I would say it's something that we need to do more focus on, and it's definitely an area of teacher training that we need to work on more as well. But thank you. So innovative activities, as you can see some of the pictures here, I think our teachers have so much fun designing these sorts of activities, which are not part and parcel of government schools. And that's why we, you know, at Rise, we care so much about this sort of thing. I talked about trips. I just wanted to kind of show a few of the photos, because it is such a lovely thing to be able to see these children, you know, go to the zoo for the first time, go to Nico Park, which is like the equivalent of like Thorpe Park, but a lot more tamer. None of your scary rides, to be fair. And things like Science City, but seeing these, you know, these installations in museums, or even as you can see us in our Kolkata Marathon gear, while we were running very slowly, we just stopped outside the Victoria Memorial in Kolkata to take a little cheeky snap, and just so much fun going on trips. And participation in events, so important. And I think, you know, a lot of the time this happens at school as well, doesn't it? You select those who are most, you know, most able in drama, they get to perform, or most able in singing, they get to perform. But it's not about that at Rise. It's about everyone having a chance to get on stage, to speak, to have their voice heard, and just really have fun with it too. And that's so important as part of this social emotional resilience piece. And it's also part and parcel of, you know, gender responsive pedagogy, to be able to think about how young women can get involved and be on stage, have a voice, be loud and proud as well. So a little bit on learning during COVID, because it has been challenging to say the least. I think more because only about 40% of our young people have access to smartphones and internet in the first place. So we made separate provisions for those that didn't through workbooks. But within the space of online learning, the fact that young people didn't have phones, they'd never been on something like Zoom call or Google Meet before, but they had a chance to. I can see that we're about to head back in 35 seconds. So I just want to see if I can show you a quick picture of the little magazine that I mentioned. So there's publication, handwritten, printed. The fact that as part of emotional well-being has to be provision of food. So during COVID, we've done food camps. I talked about the home visits, you know, gifts for children during their birthday. And at the heart of everything that we do, how do we do it? We do it through teacher development. Please stay in touch. It's so lovely that you joined this session.